holiday travel, some people get delirious, some get delayed, and some get Del Griffin.
American Light and Fixture, Director of Sales, Shower Curtain Ring Division.
Neil Page got all three.
I was on my way home to spend a nice holiday with my family. Instead, I'm in a motel bed with a stranger.
So instead of Thanksgiving with his family, he's spending 3 days with the turkey.
Two happy clams just whistling down the road.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Tony family.
Paramount Pictures presents
Wilma!
Steve Martin,
Ever been to Hawaii?
Yeah.
You see Don Ho while you were there?
See the second show, that's the best one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
John Candy,
Why are you holding my hand? Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows.
in a new film by John Hughes. Planes, trains, and automobiles.
See that Bears game last week? Yeah, hell of a game.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday early evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So this is going to be one of those kind of episodes that has different components of different potential series. It's almost a movie anniversary. Yesterday, this extraordinary, well-remembered film celebrated the 37th anniversary of when it was originally released here in the United States. It's not a Christmas movie, but it is one of the standards as far as holiday movies. And it contains what I believe to be the finest performance of easily one of the most beloved actors to ever work in the movie business, someone who has now been gone, incredibly, for more than 3 decades. The movie in question, which will also serve as our 4th entry in the ongoing series of best Christmas movies. This is a renegade pick because technically it's a Thanksgiving movie. But the spirit of the season, it could be Thanksgiving, it could be Christmas. That part does not change. The movie in question is John Hughes' fantastic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And the dearly departed, extraordinarily talented John Candy is the performer who gives his finest performance. Now, I actually got into this one on the ground floor. One of the many ironies of my very existence is that I was a film buff. I was a kid interested in movies from a very young age. My parents told me that I used to sit with my face pressed up against the screen anytime Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey aired. Now, I give my dear old dad, the C in SCF and Co., the biggest movie fan I've ever known, Alan Philip Cohen, I give him and I give my mom credit for not saying, no. Don't do that. They let me express my curiosity. I was mimicking the trip sequence at the end. It's like an LSD trip. I guess 5-year-old me got that. I don't know. But I was always interested in movies. But the only stretch of my life where I went to the movies a lot is about a 5-year period between 1993 and 1998. During that stretch, I went to the cinemas all the time. Not coincidentally, you take the middle slice of 1993 to 1998, 1994 to 1997, and you have my New York University Film School era. Another thing that is not a coincidence, it wasn't an accident. I'm watching movies in school, I'm screening films for certain classes, and I'm going to the movies. That all happened. A lot of it would be lost to history if I weren't right here where I am talking to you about it. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a movie that I saw in theaters. And something that I hadn't really put together, although I lived through it, is that my parents had recently split. At that exact time in history, they split in December of 1987. I was still 13, and I was trying to navigate And I didn't do a good job. Spoiler alert, I wasn't very good at it. But to be fair to my much younger self, there's no scenario in which any kid is going to look like a champ when his entire world, tenuous though my grasp on it was 6 months prior, a year prior, 2 years prior. Nobody is going to do well under those circumstances. So my father, we lived in a house in Massapequa, and he took a temporary, it wasn't really temporary, what he thought was a temporary dwelling in Plainview. And so you start the new life of the child of divorced parents, although they didn't get divorced for another 5 years. That's a whole other story. But we started with the weekend visits and all the kinds of things that I had heard about, but honestly didn't think I was ever going to experience. Well, I think it was the second of the weekend visits. If memory serves, it was just me and Dad. I don't know where my sister was. It might have been when she and my mother went to visit my mom's parents in Florida, because Jess was not with us. And Dad took me to the movies to see Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And as a kid who was interested in film, I wanted to see this movie. But there were a number of other big, brand name, almost franchise, well, in one case franchise, but legendary movies in theaters at that time, two of which starred a man who would win an Oscar for one of those two movies, Michael Douglas. Wall Street, first one, and Fatal Attraction were playing in the same theater that we went to see Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Now, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is not about a broken family. It is sadly, and this doesn't reveal itself, mild spoilers, but I feel like if you're already this far into this episode, you've seen this movie. But I'm still going to tread a little bit carefully. This is not about a broken family. This is not about a child of divorce. But this is about a broken man who is maybe the most friendly, kind-hearted, talkative, youthful-looking widower that you would never expect upon meeting somebody who says, "My name is Dell, my wife's name is Marie, and I'm a traveling salesman," and a damn good one, if I may say. You see this genial, gentle, jovial individual, always ready with a smile or a mostly dull story. You would never imagine that he is who he ends up being, because he's still, the default setting of his personality is the same. But all of the chatter, all of the stories, he needs connection. He needs interaction. And Steve Martin, who is hilarious in this movie, I might add. But Steve Martin is an actor. Yeah, he was a stand-up comic. John Candy is a comic actor. Steve Martin was a stand-up comic who turned out to be a phenomenal film actor, succeeding across every possible genre, all ranges of different kinds of comedy, from slapstick farce, screwball, to the more serious kinds of human comedy. Steve Martin, I believe, while he was making this movie, because there's nothing in the script, and I don't believe he got any particular direction from John Hughes, because John Hughes would have been still pretty young at this point. I mean, 16 Candles was only 4 years prior, The Breakfast Club 3 years prior. I believe at a certain point, Steve Martin decided, this is John's movie. I'm going to act like I'm in support of him. And so Steve has a couple of show-stopping moments. The first screaming laughter I ever engaged in a movie theater. I would have still been 13 when we saw this film. And it's the scene where Steve Martin is about to get a rental car. The great actress Edie McClurg. Boy, she was terrific in so many movies. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, she was in that too. The moment where he drops one F-bomb after another, when he realizes that there's been a mix-up and he goes to spot 6 and the car is supposed to be there and he flips out. The facial expressions, the slow burn, and then the explosion of rage. That was probably the biggest laugh that I had experienced up to that point in a movie theater, but it's crazy. I hadn't seen that many movies. I'm going through the mental checklist. I don't think that I had been to the movies since Star Trek IV, the previous holiday season. I don't think that I saw anything in theaters in 1987. It just didn't go. I watched a lot of movies on TV. You know, we had HBO and Cinemax. Again, I was very fortunate. We had the VHS player. You know, we go rent movies. I don't think that I had actually been to the cinemas in a year. But I wasn't just as a kid watching it for the first time. I wasn't expecting this film to have the kind of lump in the throat that it has, because the sequences of broad humor, the almost surrealist, you know, when they're in the car and it looks like they're going to die, and there's that brief shot of John Candy basically as Satan, that had people screaming, "You're going the wrong way!" For all of the slapstick, screwball farce moments, the film gives you enough of real human interaction between John Candy's wounded, but still somehow hopeful, Del Griffith, and Steve Martin's very harried and kind of an asshole, Neil Page. And I feel like he's an asshole because he can be, because his circumstances are not as right as they probably should be, given what we learn. It's a little bit like the character Steve plays in Parenthood 2 years later, where he is hardworking, he's presented as very competent, good at his job, but he should be doing better, and he shouldn't be working as hard for what he's getting. And the events of this film, you watch this movie as a kid, what I'm about to tell you is not something that registered with me. But Neil Page, I don't think, is just a bad guy, because he's not presented as an evil man. But he is somebody that should be thankful, not just because it's Thanksgiving, but he should be grateful and thankful for what he does have, because his life is pretty damn good. When we see where he lives, bro, you're already there. You've already succeeded. You're a winner at life. Stop acting like the universe keeps fucking you, because it ain't gonna work. None of that landed with me when I was a kid, but I understand it. I get it. And Neil Page does not deserve a comeuppance. The comeuppance is the fact that he has to travel with this guy that he starts off really not liking. This is not a movie star playing to the crowd and pretending, all right, he's going to... No, he doesn't want to be with Del Griffith. He doesn't like Del Griffith. But the more time he spends with him, the more he starts to suspect that he's both more and less than he seems. He's an even better salesman than you would expect. He knows how to work people. He is a people person. He probably was a better people person a decade earlier, or to be more precise, 9 years earlier. But Neil and Steve's performance hits the right notes, because after a certain point, he stops barking and starts listening. And this is another one of those movies where the lump in the throat is well earned. There are no narrative cheats to get us to the finish line. And I don't know that Del Griffith starts the film thinking that there's any scenario in which he might spend any piece of this holiday season with a family, with a friend's family. But the film builds to this emotional climax, which it's hard not to tear up. And for somebody who made such an impression, such a favorable impression on so many moviegoers, and it is also unfortunate, aside from the obvious, but just from the kind of historical perspective, I saw a meme the other day, and I think it was the actor John Hamm, and it was one of his moments from Mad Men where his face is impassive, but the skill of him as an actor and the prior identification people have with him, it's the Lev Kuleshov, where you just do a series of shots. Sorry for the 100-year-old reference. You do a series of shots, and you tell the audience what the person is thinking. He's hungry, he's angry, he's sad, he's scared, he's happy. It's just a shot of John Hamm with an impassive glare. Nice looking guy, right? We'll give him that. But above this impassive 10 seconds of John Hamm's face not changing, it said, trying to explain to my Gen Z daughter and son who John Candy was. Yeah, exactly. He's been gone 31 years. And for a significant percentage of Gen Xers, some elder millennials, their first identification with him is probably Uncle Buck. I got to be honest with you. I don't like that. Here's a hot take. Here's a hill, well, I'm not really willing to go down on. I think that Who's Harry Crumb is a better movie than Uncle Buck. Who's Harry Crumb is terrible. That's a guilty pleasure movie. It's trash. But there were, at various points in that movie, I was screaming with laughter. I don't like Uncle Buck. I find, and John Hughes, who directed Uncle Buck, he took a lot of criticism, even from the producer angle, with Home Alone, where John Candy famously plays the cameo, which almost feels more like a supporting role than a cameo. Gus Polinski, polka, polka, polka. I don't like Uncle Buck. And not because of what I'm saying, which is that it's needlessly vicious. There are characters that are too nasty for what that film, I think, is trying to do. And even John Candy's Uncle Buck, the scene with the power drill, really? Really? Conceptually, that's worse than anything that 8-year-old Kevin McAllister does to defend his home, and people were upset. Well, why does the kid have to try to hurt them? They're trying to kill him. Hello? In the immortal words of Mike Myers, hello? Don't love Uncle Buck. Who's Harry Crumb? Terrible movie, a scream. Before I forget, the stupid funniest movie of the entire decade of the 1980s, Armed and Dangerous. That is another movie that could not be made. It's so inappropriate, and it's offensive on every level and every possible social, racial class, every economic class. Everybody gets desecrated. How about eviscerated? The movie is still a scream. And it's Candy's performance. He plays the big personality, and Eugene Levy, who is also a fucking boss, a lifetime cheat code, Eugene Levy, is absolutely hysterical. But John Candy's finest performance is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because the layers of his character, and this is where the pacing comes in, and John Hughes, I think that this is probably his best directed film, better than Ferris Bueller. I've never really been a big fan of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There I had issues, even as a younger person. This is just a bunch of kids humiliating adults. Now you could say some of the adults deserve to be humiliated, but the concept never worked for me. And oddly enough, I'm a Matthew Broderick fan. I love War Games. Love War Games. War Games to this day, I think, is still the best film that Broderick ever made. And I like the film that he did with Marcia Mason and the late, great Jason Robards Jr., Max Dugan Returns. Terrific movie. That was a movie about a lot of money and a kind of estranged father trying to come back into the life of his daughter, and his grandson played by Broderick. Late era Robards, that's my favorite performance of his. My favorite performance of his overall, Once Upon a Time in the West, where he's kind of a good guy, but kind of not a good guy. But then again, Charles Bronson's Man with Harmonica is kind of a good guy, but he's not really a good guy. We root for him because he's less horrendous. It's the old Clint Eastwood High Plains Drifter, Mel Gibson in Payback. Well, we root for him because he's less horrific than everyone else. And I'm not really stretching the truth there. But as Planes, Trains, and Automobiles goes forth, if we're paying attention, and I was just 13-year-old me just needed the laughs because my life was in an uproar. Everything seemed horrendous all of a sudden. Parents I thought were a unit. Shit happens. It's life. I understand it now. Believe me, I understand it. Me at age 50 versus me at 13, not in the same universe. Yeah, you say something to me when I was a kid, I could follow what you were saying. But until you live it, until you've absorbed multiple levels of both failure and success, it doesn't hit the same way. And in the case of John Candy, it's not just that he and his wife have split. This is not a man who is hurting because he misses his ex, or they're separated and he knows they're not getting back together, or like Die Hard, Christmas movie number 3, Holly McClane is now Holly Gennaro. And am I just going to the West Coast to visit? Am I going to live? Am I going to live with my still wife and my kids? Or am I just going to end up back in New York? No, Del Griffith has deeper, more painful issues. And I know people who have lived through that level of loss, where somebody went decades, 4 decades, 5 decades before what should have been their time. You will be emotionally an open wound. You may never feel right. You may never be okay. The genius of John Candy's performance. It's not fully apparent until the very end. This is not really a spoiler. But when he realizes that Neil Page does care, that yes, I'd rather not ever see you in this context again, Del. I'd rather not travel from one part of the country to another with 8 stops in between, getting pulled over, nearly getting burned alive in a car, all of that. But when he realizes Neil cares, you see the holiday spirit. It doesn't have to be holiday spirit, but you see life come back into him. And here is a moment where the great comic is able to act with his eyes. And we can feel it. We can feel his pain, his envy. Because look what Neil has. He has a lovely wife. The kids are adorable. And he has the in-laws are there. This is the kind of holiday season I was supposed to have. I don't have. All of those emotions are playing on John Candy's face. He has the happiness of being welcomed into a home of somebody he didn't even know this guy a week ago. And he's being welcomed not as a stranger. Oh, I just picked it. No, he's being welcomed as a friend. And it's not much of a stretch to say that this is not the last time that these two gentlemen are going to be in each other's company. He's been welcomed as a friend. And now this has nothing to do with the warm-hearted, kind of stuff. But the original version of the script, and there were scenes that were shot where I think the actress was Layla Robbins, if I'm not mistaken, Neil Page's wife, she thinks he's having an affair. She doesn't think that he's being honest when presumably there were more phone calls of him. Yeah, I'm with this loudmouth guy. He's driving me crazy. And the wife was like, yeah, okay, what's her name? Are you telling people it's your niece? This was there. So it's one reason why the wife treats Del Griffith the way that she does, the almost curious way that she addresses him, is that she's actually surprised. I think that in one version of this movie that we didn't really see, and now because of YouTube, you can check out some of the deleted scenes, she thought her husband was full of shit. He was telling her the exact truth. When Del Griffith is happy, and then he has the moment where he realizes where he is and what this man has that I don't. His face changes. It's probably regret, jealousy, envy, anger. But then the goodness within him, his default setting, kindness, his face changes again. And the movie kind of ends on that. It ends on the fact this is a really nice man. For all the chatter, all of the legitimately driving Neil crazy. I mean, some of the times you could almost be on Neil's side like, bro, you got to take it easy here. For a film with so much laughter, with so many iconic, where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows. Hey, did you see that football game? The kind of toxic masculinity contest when they realize what's just happened with my hand between the two pillows. I remember, I think it was 1991, Steve Martin's greatest year. No exaggeration. He had LA Story, terrific movie, one of the best comedies, certainly one of the best studio comedies of the decade. At LA Story, Grand Canyon, as good a movie as there was, released in the year of Terminator 2, Bugsy, Silence of the Lambs, JFK, and he had Father of the Bride. One of his appearances, I'm pretty sure he was on with Letterman, but one of his appearances, he was promoting either LA Story or he was promoting Grand Canyon, whatever it was. And Steve was a guy, his hair went gray, he was very young still. He was like, he's 41 when Planes, Trains was shot, but he's by himself. He's being interviewed, and they're supposed to be talking about, let's just say it's LA Story. But Dave wanted to talk about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He made some kind of a comment about how this is one of my favorite movies of any genre. And, you and John were so great. And John was still alive at that point in time. Nobody knew that he was going to die so young. He was 42, 43 when he passed. And they did that thing they used to do on TV where they would have the guest in a tiny box, and then they would show a scene. And that's the scene that they showed. And Steve basically says, well, thanks for embarrassing me, Dave. He said, well, what was it like filming that? And then he made a joke. Well, we tried it that way a couple of times, like he was implying that they did it for real. But despite the laughs, it is not an accident that the movie ends with the kind of heart-wrenching, but still inspiring moment of rapprochement of Del, who is still a young man. John Candy was 36 when this movie was shot. This is a man who could have married young, and if he's able to somehow, he has so much life to live. He should have another 50 years. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to mourn. It's okay to miss that amazing woman, Marie. But in the immortal words of Andy Dufresne, sometimes it comes down to get busy living or get busy dying. And I like to think that Del Griffith, after this movie, after the events of this film, picks himself up and gets busy living, because he certainly deserves that. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, directed by John Hughes, a Thanksgiving film, might as well be a Christmas film. It's one of the best holiday films ever made. Starring John Candy, Steve Martin, Layla Robbins, Dylan Baker in a small role, and he was funny. And it is one of those essential movies to understand the peculiar magic and genius for the youngins who maybe only know the name of what John Candy, why he was so important, and why so many of us are still gutted that he's been gone for 31 years. This has been episode 367 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.